This Mother's Day is a bit hard for me. My mother died in January. She died of COVID. Well, actually, she died of pneumonia that was caused by COVID. And then the third thing on her death certificate said unknown etiology, as in they don't know the cause or the disease, whatever it is. Anyhow, it's May 9th, Mother's Day 2021, and I was planning on spending the day sulking and in poor pitiful me mode, but then my husband's mom decided she wanted to come for a visit. So she lives in Illinois, so she came to Fort Wayne, and I held up pretty well. I thought for sure I was going to have to suck it up and just work through the tears, but I kept thinking in the back of my mind, my mom would want me to put on a good show and be a good hostess and do something nice for Jeanette, Eddie's mom. So I did. I made some homemade ice cream and little puff pastry cups with sausage, egg, and cheese in them. And then I also cut up some fruit and made some homemade whipped cream. And we just spent the day together, went to the mall, did some shopping, and just hung out. It was really nice. We had a nice day. I still want to do something for my mom so that I can feel like I'm honoring her on Mother's Day. So what I would like to do is read something that she wrote. Now, I am a writer. For Christmas of 2019, my daughter and I produced this book. She did the cover. Can you see this little lion? My mom's favorite book of the Bible is the book of Daniel. So I took the book of Daniel, I compared it with the archaeological record, and I came up with, this is totally fictional, by the way. What I wrote is totally fictional. So I wrote a story about a young woman who knew Daniel back in the day. It's called Per, a story of love, lions, and a Hebrew named Daniel. Now, my other two books are not as warm and fuzzy as this. The other two have, they are thrillers, so just be aware of that. The part that I want to read for you today, though, is something my mom wrote in 2009 called The Life Story of Delia Bohdan. And I have a feeling that my uncle, her brother, Harold, had a lot to do with this because it sounds a lot like his writing. And my mom, I don't know if my mom was a writer and just never shared her work with me, or if Harold coached her on this, but I'm going to read it to you now. Although I have thought about doing this many times through the years, it was at my brother Harold's suggestion recently that I am finally getting started. We both wish our ancestors would have written their stories for future generations. I was born in Reno, Nevada on June 26, 1935. My earliest memories are around the age of 2 years in a duplex on what was then called B Street, now Victorian Avenue in Sparks. It was a shack of a place, but perfectly fitting with the times. Whether this is an actual memory, being so young, or enhanced by snapshots in a scrapbook Mother worked on for years. She made one for each of us 3 children. Our little family lived in Sparks in 3 other rentals over time. In the meantime, my sister Clara was born in 1938, then brother Harold in 1940. It was Depression years, and my father found work where he could get it. I recall hearing that he tried selling shoes door to door for a time. Not much, if any, success with that. He worked for a time with the city of Sparks as a garbage man, and then with a department store in Reno as a custodian, until he finally found work with Southern Pacific Railroad, currently the Union Pacific. He was a clerk in the office. Mother was a stay-at-home mom, as most mothers were then, unless they were a nurse or a school teacher. There were few options for women then. Although my parents were both Methodists, we joined the Emmanuel First Baptist Church as there was some concern in their minds that the Methodist Church in Sparks was not well established yet. I was enrolled in the cradle roll, which was, obviously, babies and mothers in the church. I still have my certificate that was given in the cradle roll, battered though it is. I began kindergarten at Robert Mitchell School. And then, soon after Harold was born, our father got bumped, and we had to move to Susanville, California. Getting bumped meant that someone with more seniority could take his job, and the railroad would place him somewhere else. So off to Susanville we went. I finished out kindergarten there and got through first grade, learning to read with the Dick and Jane series. At some point later, the Dick and Jane series was discontinued. But lucky for me, and I think my siblings, we learned to read with the assistance of Dick and Jane, Little Sister Sally, and Dog Spot. It made reading fun. World War II began December 7th, 1941, while we were still in Susanville. We were having Sunday dinner at the pastor's home when the announcement came over the radio that Pearl Harbor was bombed. We were all in shock at the news. During the summer after first grade, and I had just turned 7 years, our dad was again bumped and we were placed in Winnemucca, Nevada. I can still hear my dad singing as he was preparing to go on ahead to secure his job and a home for us. We're Winnemucca bound, we're Winnemucca bound, hi-ho the derry-o, we're Winnemucca bound, in the tune of Farmer in the Dell. That kept the children's morale boosted, whether the parents were or not. It must have been nerve-wracking to have to pack up and move to who knew what lay ahead. In Susanville, we had started with the Methodist Church there, and that pastor wrote ahead to the pastor in Winnemucca that we were coming. And that was a tremendous help, as it turned out. Daddy had found yet another shack for us. That was all we had known. But this time, this one had been built by an old woman and her son who had no idea what they were doing, and it was pretty bad. I recall the floors were all linoleum, which would have been about par for the course, but they were not on level ground and buckled badly. A bare light bulb hung down from the ceiling about halfway to the floor in the living room. And the streets were not paved, just dirt. No curbs or gutters. Our mother took one look at all that and said, "I can't wait to get bumped out of here." No developers in those days. Nor, apparently, city building inspectors. Another thing was that we had no vehicle, so Daddy had to find a place within walking distance to work, as well as to the stores and school. That limited our choices of housing. As fate would have it, Daddy never did get bumped again, and we ended up in Winnemucca for many years. We started with the Methodist Church there, and the pastor welcomed us, as did many other parishioners. That was such a morale boost, especially for Mother. She made quite a number of friends over the years, mainly through the church, and that meant such a great deal. I started second grade at Winnemucca Grammar School and graduated in 1953 from Humboldt County High School. Looking back, I do believe that we had exceptional teachers there. They seemed very capable, and weren't hampered at that time by discipline problems. They were even allowed to spank. And we would get in more trouble at home. One teacher, Mrs. Elgis, my 7th grade teacher, had her own Board of Education. It was 1 inch thick or so, board with a handle that she would use on unruly kids. She always said she was going to put jewels in it, but I don't think she ever did. She never hurt any of them with it, I hope. I'm sure that if she had raised welts, that would have been another story. Mrs. Elgis was a controversial person and made some enemies, even to this day, as she came across as rather crude, not always fair, and very opinionated. Ironically, she lived to be 102, but she taught us a lot. In 3rd grade, I began piano lessons. My parents bought an old piano which was pretty bad, but sufficed for the time being. At that time, all homes had woodsheds and wood stoves. I'm recalling that back in Susanville, our woodshed had really old, abandoned pianos sitting in it with some keys missing and some sticking. But I loved to go out there and pick out tunes on it. That could be where my parents got the idea that I had some kind of musical talent that should be encouraged, no matter the sacrifice. And a sacrifice it must have been to provide not only the piano, but the lessons. I have always appreciated that they did that for me. In later years, they bought a much better piano, which I still have. Although I never became a concert pianist, it has been a continual source of enjoyment. Nowadays, they would be considered possibly below the poverty line, but as children, we didn't notice. Most families were in the same boat anyway. One of my fondest memories is of sitting on Daddy's lap, and he would sing to me such songs as Red Wing, about an Indian maiden, or the Prisoner's Song. Why, that one I have no idea, but I enjoyed it. He would burst into song. I wonder if any fathers do that nowadays. Also, he would read the comics to me from the newspaper. I'm sure he did it for the other kids also. Of course, back then we weren't blessed with babysitters such as TVs, computers, video games, etc. What a shame. In the absence of such things, we had to play games such as hopscotch, jacks, jump rope, and cowboys and Indians with broomsticks for horses. Friends and I would ride all around the area, totally uninhibited. We also read books, colored and coloring books, and played paper dolls. I guess a few of those things are still done today, but childhood obesity was rare. In fact, obesity was rare, childhood or adult. Life was so hard physically, and fast food restaurants were unheard of. We didn't snack a lot between meals. Food was too hard to come by, so the habit didn't develop until later. Over time, we upgraded to 2 other homes. My parents found a duplex on 4th Street, owned and built by another elderly couple. But this time, in a little better shape. The husband knocked out a wall dividing the 2 sections, and we got both sides for $30 a month. I guess this was more than we paid for the other one. Never knew what that one cost. Another coal/wood stove in the kitchen, of course. But our mother made such good meals on it, and the most fantastic bread, including dinner rolls and Cinnabons. What a joy to come home hungry from school and have such treats. I never did inherit her knack for making bread. Eventually, our dad received an inheritance from an uncle, I believe. We were able to move into our first decent home, and as owners. It was on Bridge Street, part of a housing development, Winnemucca's first. The previous owners were moving to another state, but were friends and threw in the furniture for an extra $100. A 3-bedroom house and full basement, carpeted living/dining room, and an electric stove. Whoopee! It was like seventh heaven. There was also a phone, which wouldn't be there for long unless we signed with the phone company, of course. I wanted that phone so badly, I offered to pay with my babysitting money. As it was, I didn't have to. My parents got the phone in their name, and we achieved our first telephone. Also with the inheritance, we finally got a car. It was a brand new 1949 Chevrolet 4-door and called Gunmetal Blue, a blue-gray. That served us for many years. My dad couldn't wait to see some of the off-track roads he wondered about for years. So he took us on drives all over. Although our parents had their differences, they stayed together and raised us as a team. Mother said she almost left him more than once because of his cigarette habit, which they couldn't afford. Yet he criticized her when she bought a package of cookies. That's how tight money was. Sometimes when she would buy something special, she would explain that it was her cigarette money she used. Neither of them imbibed in alcohol, so that was one big savings, I'm sure. Today, we still have our poor and our homeless, but most of the rest of us have no idea how lucky we are. Our ancestors paved the way for us to live more comfortably than they went through. But so many folks now seem to be less happy or well adjusted. Can it be that hard times make us stronger and easy living makes us soft? I'll save that for a soapbox sermon someday. So now we're on to the next chapter, which is all about Susanville, California. Our family began our new life in Susanville in a duplex in which we rented both sides. The children slept in one side and parents in the other. 2 of the children were bedwetters, so Mother would have to get up twice in the night, come around, rain or shine, and get them up to use the bathroom in an effort to keep the beds dry. It didn't always work. She was forever washing bedding in the only machine in those days, wringer type. No automatic washing machine until years later. And certainly no dryers. If such things were even conceived, they definitely were not available then. Also, no disposable diapers. What fun it must have been to be a mother at that time. Of course, with such things not there, who knew any different? Our dad, with no car, had got himself a bicycle, a black one as I recall. He rode to work via that. I'm not sure if he exactly ever did work in Susanville. If he did, it was a very hilly town, and riding a bike would have been a challenge, especially in winter. What I do recall was that he worked in the town of Westwood, a distance of about 25 miles one way. Mountainous, of course, and surely no easy task on a bike. A bigger challenge than Susanville would have been. I do remember a man coming to our door at least once to give Daddy a ride to work. Whether this became a regular thing, I wish I could recall. I greatly hope so. Our next rental was a regular house. These rentals were always furnished. My parents had no furniture of their own. This place, another winner, was owned by two elderly sisters who lived nearby. Also, these places always had a pot-bellied stove in the living room. One day, the chimney came apart and soot went everywhere. I will always remember Mother with tears streaming down her face, trying to force that chimney back into place and telling me to run and get the landladies. What happened from there, I don't remember. So I guess things eventually got back to normal. This was the house with the piano in the woodshed, as I mentioned in the first part of the memoirs. This house had a ceiling-to-floor glass door as a partition between the living room and the outside door. Why? Don't ask. I have no idea. One day, Mother was reading to the three of us, but our sister Clara would have none of that. She kept running up and down, obviously trying to distract Mother and get the attention focused on herself. Perhaps it was the middle child syndrome in play here. At any rate, she kept it up in spite of Mother's admonition to stop it and come over here and settle down. Finally, Clara ran her arm through the glass door, cutting it badly. That got the attention she was after. Blood ran profusely. Mother jumped up, called back to me to watch after my brother, and went to find a neighbor who might have a car and could take them to the hospital. She found Mrs. Swain, a good neighbor and friend who luckily was at home. Clara had several stitches in her arm and scars to the day she died, I guess. I assume the glass got cleaned up and the bill for the damages paid for, somehow. Our backyard was actually a field with lots of trees and bushes. Really quite beautiful. A neighbor boy, age 11, one day stole his father's cigarettes and lured me, age 6, to go and have a smoke at the farthest part of the field along a stream and with overhanging bushes. I took a few puffs and became so sick I had to weave and stagger back to the house, vomiting all the way. Mother asked what was wrong, and of course I didn't feel I should admit what I had done, knowing it would mean a fate worse than death. She was ready to call the doctor when I finally decided I had better fess up. When my dad came home, they decided that I had probably learned my lesson and the sickness was punishment enough. So that took care of that until many years later when I took another puff. By then I was a young adult and I didn't get sick. Just didn't care for it. During that era, Mother got her groceries via a grocery delivery man. With no car and no phone, she would have to walk to the store and leave off her grocery list with her name and address. Clerks would fill the order and they would be delivered to our home. The delivery man was such a kind person. He always gave me attention, so I looked forward to his visits. One day, I fell out of a tree in our front yard, which I climbed often. The tree, that is. I hit on a retaining wall. Didn't break anything, but skinned my back and felt the blow really bad. The delivery man came and visited a minute with Mother, but didn't ask about me, and she didn't happen to discuss me at all. I lay there in bed feeling really sorry for myself, especially to be ignored by them both. But I got over it, and life went on. Mother took me to my first picture show movie. It was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. How fascinating that was. It must have been on a day that my dad was able to stay with the others. I'm sure Clara would have been too hyper. She would have run up and down the aisle and run her arm through the movie screen. She would have gotten us kicked out of there. Harold, of course, was still a baby. Our second movie was Bambi. It was such a darling story and so well done, as we all know. But so sad. Mother and I cried our eyes out. And that is all that I have of my mother's life story that she wrote in 2009. So thank you for letting me honor my mother this way, and I hope you all have a very happy Mother's Day or happy weekend. And if you are missing your mom like I am missing my mom, well, I'm here to, I guess just to grieve with you. And if you have a strained relationship with your mother, or if you're a mother with a strained relationship with your children, my heart goes out to you. I feel so privileged that I had a positive relationship with my mom and that I have a positive relationship with my daughter. I will never take those two things for granted. I love my mom very much. She was a wonderful person, a beautiful soul, and I'm happy that she's at peace now and not suffering, but I do miss her terribly. As for the piano, you'll be happy to know that my nephew is in possession of the piano, and his oldest daughter, who I believe is 12 now, has taken an interest in learning to play. So at least we have a good fate for that piano that she has. And my daughter's learning to play as well, but she lives in Sacramento, so she's a long way from the piano. So thank you all for joining me today, and I'll see you on Tuesday.